U.S. exceptionalism, it's at least paused. It's giving you a sense of the sentiment on Wall Street. So all this action on the stock market is one thing. There's also rising concerns about the U.S. economy.
Could a single keystroke in Tokyo shatter the world's financial backbone? You're about to see how, at 9:42 in the morning, Japan turned 1.7 trillion United States dollars of Treasury bonds into a weapon. While markets hummed along, algorithmic models erupted as crimson alerts flickered across screens. You'll learn why this unprecedented strike happened under President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney, and what it means for every retirement plan and bank account. What compelled Japan to remake debt into an assault? How did a New York fund manager choke on his coffee at the mere sight of the sell-off? Will your savings survive the quakewaves still rolling across continents? Stay with us as we peel back urgent layers of economic intrigue, expose astonishing hidden alliances scrambling for power, and reveal the shocking final twist that could dramatically and unexpectedly redefine the global economy and your future forever. Tokyo's calculated retaliation. The move was far from spontaneous. Months earlier, electric vehicle tariffs branded Japanese innovation a threat, severing ties of technological collaboration. Beneath the marble floors of Kasumi Gaseki, senior finance chiefs convened in a windowless war room. Under the soft glow of LED panels, they debated the merits of yen weaponization. A senior bureaucrat declared, "If they tax our future, we will tax their present," weighed against the scars of past accords. Most memorably, the Plaza Accord of 1985. This was a mirror image feat. Japan was no junior partner. It was an equal with leverage over America's debt addiction. Strategy met execution on a quiet Thursday. Orders were sent across multiple trading desks simultaneously, ensuring maximum disruption. Tokyo's plotters had studied the American playbook: hit bond markets first, then exploit the panic. Their gamble depended on the assumption that U.S. policymakers would have few tools beyond hasty tariff threats. By the time Washington reacted, the damage was done. This was not only a financial reprisal, it was a statement of national pride. Japanese officials believed they were defending centuries of craftsmanship and innovation from foreign hostility. As whispers of retribution spread through international banking circles, Tokyo's architects savored the impending fallout. The bill would come due, and America could not refuse to pay. While the financial storm brewed in Tokyo, Wall Street remained unaware of the shockwave racing its way. Wall Street's unraveling, news of the bond dump raced across the Atlantic to Chicago, Boston, and San Francisco. In institutional boardrooms, panic spread faster than any virus. Hedge funds dumped blue-chip stocks in a bid for liquidity. Pension funds halted contributions. Corporate treasurers suspended share buybacks. Confidence leaked out of the market like air from a slashed tire. Within 3 weeks, an eye-watering 5 trillion United States dollars in equity value evaporated. Retail investors watched in horror as their accounts bled red ink. A high school teacher in Florida refreshed her retirement dashboard, only to see 12% of her long-term savings wiped out in a single click. Funding models once deemed bulletproof failed spectacularly under the strain. Financial news networks buzzed with grim analytics, yet none captured the visceral fear gripping private investors. Algorithms, designed to maintain equilibrium, instead amplified the chaos. Automated sell programs, triggered by threshold breaches, intensified sell-offs and deepened the market freefall. Even megabanks paused to recalibrate risk protocols they had assumed unbreakable. Wall Street's panic was only chapter 1. The dollar itself was next. Confidence on the brink. Belief underpins fiat currency more than any statute or treaty. When faith falters, the currency crumbles. The 10-year Treasury yield soared from 4% to over 6% in a single session, a seismic spike unmatched since the mortgage panic of 2008. Investors likened the scene to a lighthouse flickering before every ship in the harbor collided. Dr. Helena Cook, Nobel laureate in economic sciences, warned of a self-fulfilling stampede as traders raced to reduce exposure. Across Manhattan, anxiety replaced the usual hum of orderly commerce. Firms convened emergency meetings, reprimanding front office staff for underestimating Tokyo's resolve. Outside the New York Federal Reserve, speculators whispered of contagion spreading to emerging markets and European bond markets. In Washington, the White House Situation Room bristled with tension. President Donald Trump, alerted to the crisis mid-press briefing, signaled for punitive measures. Advisors cautioned against hasty escalation, forecasting a velocity-driven inflation spike and potential recession. Yet the president, focused on perceived weakness in American manufacturing, reached for his tariff hammer. This was a moment where sentiment mattered more than spreadsheets. Confidence on the brink signaled a turning point. And in the Oval Office, President Trump drafted his largest tariff proclamation ever, preparing to wage an economic war unlike any before. Trump's furious reaction. In the White House's secure Situation Room, tension crackled like static electricity. Walls adorned with screens pulsed with real-time bond yields, plummeting and cascading market alerts. The chief economic advisor laid out the devastation. Japanese bond yields had soared past 7%, triggering a frantic sell-off that hemorrhaged capital from U.S. Treasuries. But President Donald Trump was already seizing his pen, eyes narrowing as he sketched out his counterstrike. Within minutes, the executive order was drafted. Impose 100% duties on virtually every category of Japanese imports: automobiles, electronics, steel, even semiconductors. It was billed as the ultimate safeguard for American manufacturing lore, a defensive salvo to protect Detroit's legacy and Motor City's vaunted supply chains. As he signed with flourish, Trump declared, "If they wage bond war, we answer with steel," unleashing a whirlwind of political theater. Cameras were barred, yet cable news anchors immediately shifted to breathless voiceover as senior advisors sparred over the fallout. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, her tone measured but grave, warned that such draconian tariffs risked igniting a runaway inflation spiral. Grocery bills could spike, mortgage rates could climb, and consumer confidence might shatter. Her cautions ricocheted off resolute aides. Afternoon press briefings took on a militant tenor. Every container arriving at Los Angeles docks or Newark piers would now face punitive barriers. Meanwhile, in Cleveland's crowded Bring Jobs Home rally, hard-hat workers roared approval, saluting the president's aggressive posture. Yet just a few rows back, Midwestern farmers, those reliant on imported tractor parts and affordable harvest equipment, exchanged uneasy glances. Political consultants began recalibrating swing state models, questioning whether a broad America First appeal could survive the spike in farm input costs. In Washington's marble corridors, allies clamored for similar measures against European hesitancy, while insiders wondered if this vendetta would shield Detroit or simply punish everyday Americans. We've uncovered how a single financial move from Tokyo sent shockwaves through the U.S. economy, leaving Wall Street reeling and Washington scrambling. You now know the real story behind Japan's trillion-dollar power play and its ripple effects on global finance. If you appreciate the effort that goes into breaking down these complex stories, consider subscribing. Your support helps us keep digging deeper. The global power shift. Halfway around the world, Tokyo's quiet corridors hummed with diplomatic urgency. Japanese ambassadors and finance ministry emissaries, accustomed to low-key briefings, now found themselves on urgent calls to Beijing, Seoul, New Delhi, and Jakarta. The once modest ASEAN currency swap network, designed as a modest backstop for regional liquidity, was turbocharged overnight into a bold counterweight to dollar dominance. In embassy war rooms, strategic maps appeared on large plasma screens, scarlet arrows marking dollar outflows from major Asian central banks, emerald streams denoting yen, won, and rupee inflows into regional swap lines. Analysts in Singapore, enthralled by the rapid mobilization, began calling it Bretton Woods in reverse. The coalition offered coordinated liquidity lines totaling well over $100 billion, enough to cushion sovereign bond markets and backstop commercial lending. Beijing's representatives quietly applauded the move, seeing it as a diplomatic olive branch and strategic hedge against Washington's unpredictability. South Korea, still nursing memories of prior trade spats, welcomed the expanded safety net. Even India, traditionally reticent to cooperate on economic policy, signed on, eyeing the chance to insulate the rupee against violent intraday swings. In Brussels, the tremors were felt immediately. European Central Bank Chief Christine Lagarde watched yen inflows grow alongside the euro, prompting debates among Eurogroup ministers. Should the euro join the coordinated lines, or would that simply deepen its entanglement in US-Asia rancor? Whitehall analysts whispered about forging a European digital euro to bypass dollar rails, while French and German trade lobbies braced for spilled reciprocity. And through all of this, another key player found itself navigating a rapidly changing economic order: Europe's strategic dilemma. In a candlelit conference chamber deep within the European Central Bank headquarters, ministers from Paris, Berlin, and Rome sat shoulder to shoulder around an oval mahogany table. Silver tea sets cooled in the center, forgotten as the conversation turned urgent. Trade associations representing Bordeaux vintners, Bavarian automotive suppliers, and Andalusian olive oil cooperatives all pressed Europe's leaders. Strengthen ties with Washington, or hedge bets with Asia's new financial framework. Atlanticist veterans argued that standing firm with the United States was essential. The NATO alliance and centuries of shared values could not be sacrificed for short-term economics. Yet, younger pragmatists countered that rising yields on Japanese and Korean bonds signaled a tectonic shift. Europe could no longer hoard solely dollar reserves without risking destabilizing shocks. A somber vintner from Bordeaux sighed, "Centuries in a bottle, stranded at customs." His words hung heavy in the lamplit air. Whispers circulated of secret talks between ECB technocrats and officials in Singapore and Seoul, exploring swap line expansion to the euro. The idea of a fully fledged, blockchain-enabled digital euro lifeboat gained traction, promising to speed cross-border transactions outside SWIFT's purview. But every diplomatic overture risked stoking U.S. ire. As ministers weighed letters to Washington, the ticking clock loomed. Each hour of delay cemented Asia's financial coalition, and Europe's choice grew more fraught. Across the Atlantic, decisions made in European boardrooms would soon determine whether the continent aligned with old allies or embraced new economic realities. Canada's calculated distance. North of the 49th parallel, Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed the House of Commons with measured resolve. He lauded 3 decades of North American economic integration, then pivoted. Our sovereignty and stability demand strategic diversification. Behind him, behind glass and oak panels, MPs leaned forward as Carney unveiled $7 billion Canadian dollars in new trade and defense agreements, anchoring Canada's future to Australia's long-range radar deployments and deepening market access with the European Union. On Canada's icy frontier, the newly commissioned icebreaker True North cut a solitary swath through polychromatic Arctic ice, its name a symbolic assertion of autonomy. Canadian negotiators had quietly reduced holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds by nearly 10% and inked expanded currency swap arrangements with China, Japan, and South Korea. Port operators in Vancouver and Halifax braced for shifts in shipping patterns as supply chains recalibrated. Though Washington's officials barely noticed the subtle realignment at first, Main Street USA soon felt the shockwaves. Midwestern factories that once imported stamping dyes from Ontario faced new tariff surprises. Retailers that sourced Canadian-made winter equipment grappled with price hikes. Even U.S. grain exporters found their Canadian rail connections reprioritized for Asian-bound shipments. With Canada charting its own path, the implications for cross-border trade and economic partnerships became increasingly complex. Inflation's ruthless grip. From the fluorescent glare of supermarket freezers in Dayton to the crowded checkout lanes of Denver, American families found themselves caught in a tightening vice. Milk leaped 30% in mere weeks. Gallon jugs that once stood at $3.50 now hovered near $5. Eggs vaulted 45% as carton prices climbed from $2 to nearly $3. Even the humble loaf of sandwich bread surged 20%. forcing shoppers to weigh the cost of gasoline against the price of peanut butter sandwiches. A single mother of two in Dayton recounted tearing up over her grocery list, torn between filling her tank and filling her children's bellies. As headline inflation blasted past 8% nationwide, the steepest climb since the 1970s, energy bills soared beyond 12%. Utility statements arrived like ransom notes, demanding payment in full lest lights and heat be cut. Tariffs on Japanese electronics and auto parts rippled through supply chains, jacking up the sticker prices on everything from washing machines to laptop batteries. Bond market turbulence sent mortgage rates soaring, turning 30-year loans into short-term nightmares. And a weakening dollar made every import more expensive, pushing the price of coffee, cocoa, and spices into uncharted territory. Across kitchen tables and living room sofas, protectionism had become an unwelcome roommate, bleeding household budgets faster than paychecks could replenish them. Credit card interest rates followed suit, climbing to levels unseen in decades. Minimum payment notices arrived with threatening frequency, and late fees piled onto already fragile balances. Local food banks reported lines twice as long as the previous winter, with parents arriving hours before opening just to secure a single bag of staples. School cafeterias stretched supplies thin, substituting powdered milk for fresh and tacking peanut butter sandwiches onto every menu. Economists warned that the scene resembled a pressure cooker, whistling on the brink of explosion. Without a clear release valve, amid rising costs and economic strain, a new wave of discontent was brewing, leading to a movement that would challenge the very fabric of American labor, the worker rebellion. In Detroit's historic assembly plants, once the throbbing heart of American manufacturing, silence fell like a shutter snapping shut. The United Automobile Workers, furious over stalled production and skyrocketing parts costs, downed tools in a coordinated walkout. Within days, steelworkers in Birmingham and welders on Michigan's Upper Peninsula joined the exodus, transforming what began as a localized grievance into the largest labor uprising since 1934. Picketers spilled onto highways and factory gates. Placards raised high. Jobs, justice. No more trade war. Chants reverberated down industrial corridors as strikers blamed tariff-driven supply snarls for missing rivets, idle robots, and paycheck cutoffs. Union leaders denounced the administration's policies as economic arson, a deliberate torching of the very industries protectionism promised to preserve. Social media served as an accelerant, with hashtags Stand With Workers and solidarity tokens spreading solidarity across sectors. Video clips of teachers joining the picket lines in Philadelphia and transit workers in Chicago blocking maintenance depots went viral, fusing disparate labor struggles into a unified front. By week's end, over 5 million workers had joined the uprising. Machinists, truck drivers, retail clerks, and even hospital janitors walked out in protest of rising costs and stalled wages. Cities faced cascading service disruptions. Transit lines ground to a halt. Public libraries closed their doors. And emergency responders operated on skeleton crews. Municipal officials scrambled to negotiate temporary waivers for essential services, while union negotiators drew battle lines for a nationwide contract renegotiation. As workers took to the streets, corporate leaders began to reconsider their alliances, signaling a shift in how big business approached the evolving economic crisis. Corporate America breaks rank. Far from protest lines and supermarket aisles, the C-suite drama played out in hushed tones and encrypted video conferences. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, formerly staunch allies of the administration, now eyed Washington with growing suspicion. Political Action Committee contributions to the president's campaign slumped nearly 50% as corporate lobbyists quietly shifted funds toward congressional candidates, pledging stability over rhetorical battles. A marquee investment bank abruptly relocated its annual gala from Mar-a-Lago to Zurich, a symbolic rebuke that did not go unnoticed in boardrooms nationwide. In private meetings, executives lamented over bottled Moravian wines and artisanal hors d'oeuvres, debating whether to lobby for immediate tariff relief or begin contingency plans for relocating overseas. Asset managers warned that sustained policy volatility threatened systemic risks. International investors flagged protracted uncertainty, sending equity flows into safer havens. Private equity firms hit the brakes on major acquisitions, citing opaque trade policies as a barrier to forecasting returns. One bank chairman deadpanned, "The golden ticket became a hot potato," capturing the shift from bullish endorsement to cautious distancing. The boardroom betrayals were silent but potent. Proposals circulated to diversify investment into Southeast Asia and Europe, while insurance underwriters started surcharges for political risk coverage. Even longtime corporate foundations paused planned donations to domestic workforce initiatives, fearing backlash if perceived as too cozy with the administration. With corporate confidence waning, social tensions in urban and rural communities alike started to escalate, revealing a nation increasingly at odds with itself. The social divide. As urban centers marshaled mutual aid networks, pop-up food pantries in Brooklyn basements, and volunteer bartering circles in San Francisco, the rest of the country watched from a widening fault line. In Kansas wheat country, farmers stared at empty grain elevators, once destined for Japanese buyers, while disputes over fertilizer shortages ignited town hall confrontations. Independent cafes in Brooklyn and Portland passed along surcharges to customers, citing steep tariffs on imported espresso machines. Cable news outlets pivoted from campaign soundbites to survival economics, framing the national conversation around an emerging cultural schism. Globalization's proponents versus isolation's beneficiaries. Sociologists flagged the deepening rifts. Distrust blossomed not only between socioeconomic classes, but also along urban-rural lines. City dwellers complained of overflowing food bank lines and eviction threats, while small-town residents blamed distant policymakers for boarded-up storefronts and shuttered factories. Online forums brimmed with bitterness. One side lamented the erosion of shared prosperity. The other celebrated regained sovereignty, even as grocery shelves grew bare. Across empty supermarket aisles once stocked with inexpensive Japanese electronics and affordable auto parts, the telltale symbol of broken promises stood in stark relief. Meanwhile, as social divisions deepened, the automotive industry found itself at the epicenter of economic realignment, with dealerships facing an uncertain future. The exodus of dealerships. AutoNation's bold decision to shed 5 Ford franchises in a single quarter marked a turning point. What began as a cost-cutting maneuver quickly revealed a deeper crisis. Ford dealerships were bleeding capital without delivering returns. News of AutoNation's move rippled through the industry, making clear that even the largest dealer groups were losing faith in Ford's prospects. Smaller franchise owners took heed. Many started exploring alliances with Toyota or Chevrolet, eyeing more stable brands. In rural communities, where Ford once enjoyed near-religious brand loyalty, the change hit hardest. A shuttered dealership was more than a lost showroom. It meant fewer jobs, less local tax revenue, and dwindling civic pride. Credit tightened as floor plan lenders grew wary. Dealerships that couldn't meet inventory financing obligations faced looming foreclosures. In towns where a Ford dealer was the economic anchor, the threat of closure sent shockwaves through Main Street. Without an authorized service center within a 100-mile radius, truck owners found routine maintenance a logistical nightmare. Repair bays lay idle, and vehicles sat rusting in farmyards. The Trump administration couldn't ignore the fallout. The Commerce Department launched a study on rural dealership closures, probing the broader impact on America's transportation backbone. Dealers and local officials appealed for intervention, warning that Ford's downturn risked hollowing out whole communities. Behind the scenes, Whispers claimed dealer groups were quietly negotiating brand switches, signaling a tectonic shift in the auto retail landscape. Rivals smell blood. As Ford's dealer network faltered, competitors pounced with surgical precision. Tesla extended paid supercharger access to stranded Ford drivers, weaving its charging infrastructure into formerly Ford-dominated territories and converting moments of frustration into brand loyalty. In once quiet rural corridors, sleek Tesla stations sprouted where Ford showrooms had stood empty, their glowing canopies a stark symbol of a shifting automotive landscape. Meanwhile, whispers of cross-brand partnerships fueled speculation that even Ford's longtime allies might soon view Tesla as indispensable. Toyota countered with a savvy ad blitz, emphasizing rock-solid reliability and generational trust. Bolstered by Prime Minister Mark Carney's lucrative green tech incentives, Toyota portrayed itself as a safe harbor in a storm of uncertainty, promising seamless service and resale values that wouldn't disappear overnight. TV spots contrasted smiling Toyota families against desolate Ford lots, an unmistakable invitation to switch allegiances and hedge bets on a brand seemingly built for both nostalgia and tomorrow. China's BYD took an even more aggressive tack, undercutting Ford on price for fleet and municipal buyers, and leveraging low-cost, duty-free assembly lines in Mexico. Their electric vans offered total cost of ownership figures that left Ford's workhorse F-Series looking antiquated on paper, prompting logistics firms and public agencies once loyal to Ford to schedule blind test drives. Soon, city councils and delivery networks began trial runs of BYD's electric alternatives, sending ripples through boardrooms and union halls alike. Analysts wasted no time baptizing Ford a legacy struggler, a label that stung more as word spread of potential Ford-Tesla charging partnerships. With competitors gaining ground, Ford faced a pivotal moment: adapt to the changing landscape or risk losing its iconic status. A legacy on the line, Ford's troubles transcended balance sheets. It was an identity crisis writ large. For over a century, the blue oval symbolized American ingenuity. V8 muscle cars, rugged pickups, and the world-changing assembly line. Today, Ford straddled two worlds: the nostalgic roar of internal combustion and the silent promise of electrification. That tension played out in flashy concept reveals and muted quarterly earnings calls alike, leaving observers wondering which vision would prevail. Traditionalists championed icons like the Mustang and the V8 engine, rallying around heritage models with social media campaigns and enthusiast meetups. Yet the next generation clamored for Blue Cruise autonomous tech and the F-150 Lightning electric pickup, craving innovation over tradition and sustainability over spectacle. This dual strategy blurred Ford's brand message, leaving consumers and investors scratching their heads over what the company truly stood for. Union members, fearing job cuts from an EV pivot, rallied behind President Trump's calls to protect American manufacturing and preserve existing plant operations. Meanwhile, younger buyers chased innovation and cost savings, drawn instead to brands with a singular forward-looking focus. Internally, proposals ranged from spinning off the electric division to doubling down on performance vehicles. But each option risked fracturing the company's heritage or alienating core constituencies. Canada's offer, substantial subsidies for shifting EV production north of the border, added another twist to Ford's strategic calculus. Michigan lawmakers bristled at the prospect of domestic job losses, threatening to block incentives for any automaker that strayed too far from American soil. Suddenly, Ford was tugged between divergent political and economic forces on both sides of the border, its leadership caught in a high-stakes game of national interests. Now there is only one question left: can Ford survive the next decade? Ford's path forward demands bold, uncompromising choices. Shrinking operations could improve short-term margins, but might sacrifice the scale needed to compete with lean, vertically integrated rivals. Deeper tech partnerships could modernize the lineup quickly, yet risk alienating core fans who see Ford's DNA tied to self-reliance. A split corporate structure might unlock fresh investment for EVs, but could dilute the brand's storied heritage. The Trump administration's hinted tariffs on imported EVs could provide temporary relief against cheaper Chinese and Mexican-built models, giving Ford breathing room to recalibrate. Conversely, Carney's North American EV corridor incentives promised long-term production synergies. If Ford could navigate the tangled web of regional politics and incentives without losing face on either side. History offers cautionary tales. Kodak clung to film, Nokia to feature phones, and both ultimately paid the price for resisting seismic shifts. Ford's challenge is even more complex. It must evolve its century-old legacy without sacrificing the soul that made it an icon. Some industry veterans believe Ford still has the agility and heritage to thrive. Others fear it may become an American Kodak, fondly remembered but incapable of keeping pace. Ultimately, Ford's fate hinges on redefining what the Blue Oval stands for in an era defined by innovation, sustainability, and connectivity. Will it adapt successfully, balancing respect for its past with a leap into the future? Or will it become a relic of a bygone automotive age, admired in museums but absent from the roads of tomorrow? Only time and the high-stakes decisions made in boardrooms and factory floors will tell. Let us know your thoughts below and stay tuned for more insider analysis on the shifting auto industry.